is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And with another round of AFL action in the books, done and dusted, locked away in the past. It's beyond us now. We can now take the time to reflect on said round. And round 17 saw some monumental things happen. We're talking a huge upset. We're talking statistical anomalies. We are talking about one of, actually, it is the most over umpired game, not just this year, but in almost 20 years. This round had everything, and it all kicked off on Thursday night at GMHBA Stadium with Geelong hosting Brisbane. Two teams running in completely different trajectories when we're talking about form. Geelong had lost their last 4 heading into this game. Brisbane had won their last 3, I believe, and are starting to build ahead of steam. The team that we saw win the previous 2 premierships is starting to emerge again. They're really starting to find themselves. They're launching from defensive 50. Their midfielders are getting on top of the stoppage game. And this was a game that was earmarked, at least by myself, as game of the round. 2 teams that are going to be at the pointy end of finals, because we've seen it every year. Geelong just find a way to get to a prelim all the time, regardless of how their form runs in the home and away season, and Brisbane have been the benchmark over the last 2 to 3 years. So coming into this game, you expected some great things, and we were delivered some of the most one-sided games, like quarter by quarter, that we have seen both Geelong suffer and Brisbane deliver. We have seen some wild things happen this year, but 2 of the quarters in this particular game, we saw absolute blowouts. And it's interesting, because in the first quarter and the third quarter of this game, Brisbane put the foot down and looked undeniably the better team. But then in the second and fourth quarters, they very much struggled to register a score and open the door for Geelong to come back. So I'm sitting here kind of pondering and wondering whether or not we should be touting Brisbane for this win, whether we should be lauding Geelong for coming back and making it a contest. But at the end of the day, it was Brisbane by 22 points on the road. The match timeline will speak volumes to what I was just suggesting. At quarter time, Brisbane led 8 goals straight, 48 to 1 goal 5. During the second term, they kicked 1 goal 6 to finish 60 at halftime. Geelong kicked 6 goals 6, 53, trailing by 7 points. Three-quarter time, Brisbane managed to put on another huge haul of goals, kicking 8 goals 2 to register 110, with Geelong kicking 4 goals 3 to register 80, and the final scoreline saw Brisbane 19-9, only kicking 2 goals 1 in the final term, to Geelong's 14-17, kicking 3 goals 3, finishing 123-101. And again, this was 2 quarters that absolutely got blown apart. In the first and in the third, Brisbane notched on 8 goals, but outside of that, they only managed 3 goals for the rest of the game, and that opened the door for Geelong to come back in. I don't know where that disconnect happened. I don't understand how you could be flying and then have your gameplays kind of thrown in the lurch, and then you come back and you fly again, and then you throw it to the lurch again. It was interesting. It was very interesting. It kind of still had a bit of an air of shadow of doubt about it, because we know Brisbane at their best can be the best in the comp, but we have failed to see that continuously throughout the year, especially during the first half where they struggled to get out of the gates. And I felt like some of that was starting to slowly creep back into this game. Geelong were at full tilt, full strength. Bailey Smith back in, Tom Stewart back in. As far as a full repertoire of players and talent, they had almost everybody they would have in their best 23 at their disposal. And yet we had some players for Geelong underperform severely. Jeremy Cameron's obviously come into this year still with nerve issues going on with his arm, because we will talk about his stats individually shortly for a guy that you know, can tear teams apart. He'd be tearing his fucking hair out at the end of this game, I tell you what. Yeah, and it was a really weird game by design with certain performances as well, because Kai Lohman pops up and kicks 5. Patrick Dangerfield winds back the clock. He kicks 5. Zach Bailey kicks 3. It was a real eclectic mix of players popping up. Darcy Wilmot takes 11 intercept possessions, the most on the ground. Josh Dunkley lays 14 tackles, the most on the ground. It was a game that needed to be seen to be believed. Both teams had players throwing everything at this game. And it was unfortunately the team that failed to fire the most, which was Geelong. They just had so many key pieces not really do anything in this game. Very stagnant. The team stats, let's talk about it. Brisbane led the disposal count 384 to 365, leading the kicking game by 66, but losing the handball game by almost 50. Around the ground, they only ran at 66 and 69% effectiveness equally, which is well down on their seasonal averages. Inside 50, Geelong only ran at a 44%, down from their 51% seasonal average. Brisbane ran at 51%, which is down from their 54% seasonal average. You can look at the stoppage game. 48 to 40 hitouts the way of Brisbane. The clearance was slightly won by Geelong, 42 to 40. So in that stoppage game, there was plenty of ball to be won by both sides. It was pretty much an even keel. It was split down the middle. And with two teams that prominently, you know, boast stacked midfields, you wouldn't expect anything less. Around the ground, it was the uncontested possession that went the way of Brisbane, the contested that went the way of Geelong. Brisbane actually turned the ball over 11 more times than Geelong did. It was just a failure to capitalise on that turnover, which we saw. We've seen Geelong absolutely rip teams apart through turnover before. Only a few weeks ago, where they dismantled the Gold Coast, they did so off of forward half turnover and registered over 40 points in that game off of that turnover pressure. But they just failed to get it done. The marks around the ground, Brisbane were able to really limit Geelong's ability to take those intercept grabs, to go sideways, go backwards, and take the sting out of the game. Geelong normally averaged 91 marks a game, and in this game only managed 66, whereas Brisbane managed 102. 38 more marks around the ground, and they were able to launch from that defensive 50, just as we saw them do against Sydney last week. Tackles were even. Inside 50 tackles were pretty much even. Everything else was even keel. It was just the separation, I think, of defensive 50 setting the game up for their side. We know Geelong love doing that slow build up. They'll kick it to Tom Stewart. He'll kick it backwards. He'll kick it sideways. They'll take the sting out of the game and they'll launch from there. But Brisbane were just shutting down everything in their own intercept game and were just quicker to move the ball on, which caught Geelong off guard most of the night. Turning attention to individuals, I don't think there were any injuries. I just want to make sure there was not before we press on. There were a couple. So both Zach Bailey ended the game with hamstring tightness. I think that was probably more precautionary than anything. And Gardner has done a hamstring, which is going to be hampering to their back six. It's going to be interesting to see how they move forward from that. But I mentioned Jeremy Cameron and some other players on that team that failed to deliver anything. Looking forward of the ball, that's where most of the damage come from. Young Oliver Henry only had 10 touches for the game, didn't register a score. Jack Henry had 5 touches for the game, didn't register a score. Jeremy Cameron, I need to know his time on ground before I register his stats. I need to know how long he was on the ground for. He had 90% game time, just to put into retrospect how long he played for here. So more often than not, he was out on the field. He had 4 disposals for the game, did not register a score. For somebody that has won a Coleman, for last year was chasing 100 goals, he was that in form. This is a very quiet night for their forward 3, and they're probably their big 3 targets. Outside of that, Lawson Humphreys only had 16. We're used to seeing a lot more from him. Mark O'Connor had a very down game. Sam DeConning only had 11 disposals with 10 hitouts. Connor O'Sullivan was very quiet in defense. Shannon Neal had 11 touches and 3 goals. A lot more reputable in that fact. But yeah, a lot of these players. Tom Atkins, normally a tackling machine, only managed 3 tackles for the game. O'Sheen Mullen only laid 4 for the game. These are prime, like, defensively sound players. That just, it's almost like they rested on their laurels a little bit and they were expecting the home ground advantage of GMHBA to play into factor here, but unfortunately it was not the case. And you know, some people will argue, looking at the free kick count and how it was skewed, I think it was about 7 or 8 free kicks extra to Geelong on the night, that the umpires were trying to keep them in the game. And there's a whole rhetoric about the umpires with certain teams, and we're going to talk about umpiring, I think, rather heavily through the course of this round recap, because there are some instances that do need to be highlighted in that front. But Brisbane were just ultimately the better team. And while there were some big performers for Geelong, of which I still firmly think, statistically and impact-wise, Bailey Smith was best on ground in this game, it's hard to knuckle down and definitively say who else outside of that configuration. Now, I could say Patrick Dangerfield, he kicked 5. Kai Lohmann kicks 5. Zach Bailey kicks 3. I'm going to throw some votes out here to some players that, when you comparatively look at them against their teammates, some people might question my sanity just a little bit. But I thought the defensive efforts of Darcy Wilmot in this game needs to be highlighted. I've compiled my best 22 under 22 video for the mid-season anyway, mid-year, mid-season, and Darcy Wilmot features in that best 22 under 22. He is having somewhat of a year. His intercept game is incredible. He's not scared to take the game on. He's one of those players that will intercept and then just get that launch going, whether it's a huge hoof to get a long ball going, or he just takes the game on and he runs with it. And as somebody watching externally from the outside, if I could have my picking of Brisbane players, Darcy Wilmot would be high on my list as somebody who, you know, supports Richmond and would happily bring somebody that has his tenacity and his willingness to take the game on into our team. So he's getting 1 vote from me in this game. He had 26 disposals, 11 of which were contested, and 11 intercepts for the game, which was a game high registration. 4 marks, 1 clearance, 593 meters gained, and 6 score involvements. The 2 vote here, and there are plenty of players here from Brisbane, like Will Ashcroft had 32. You know, Zach Bailey had 3 goals and had 20. Levi Ashcroft had 21. Lachie Neale had 28. Kai Lohmann kicked 5. Patrick Dangerfield kicked 5. And I'm still giving it to Josh Dunkley, because his defensive pressure in that midfield is what helped around some critical stoppage work that set up this Brisbane win. His tenacity and his ability to not only lay actual pressure, but to imply perceived pressure, to force those fumbles, to force those errors, was huge in this game. 17 disposals, 9 were contested, 3 marks, 14 tackles, 3 clearances, 211 meters gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, and I touched on it already. I think the stats speak for themselves. I think Bailey Smith was best on. Now, did he kick 5? No, he did not. But he had 31 disposals, 14 of which were contested, 3 marks, 9 tackles, 7 clearances, 547 meters gained, 2 goal assists, and a game-high 9 score involvements. He was as influential a cat that there was outside of Dangerfield kicking 5 and Max Holmes, you know, launching and doing what Max Holmes does. Again, I'm going to get dragged. It is hard from my perspective to nail a 3-2-1 vote system. Maybe moving forward into 2027 and beyond, I do like the coaches' votes where we go 5-4-3-2-1. That might be better, because then we have a better scope of being able to vote for players that deserve it. So if that's something you think I should do moving forward, let me know in the comment section down below. But I can assure you, some players that missed out here they're going to feature in the Team of the Week later in the video, so it's not all doom and gloom. Speaking of doom and gloom, though, question marks. What did we learn about Brisbane? We learnt that they are back. Their defensive rebound game is setting up some huge opportunities for their midfield that is starting to absolutely dominate some stoppage work, and forward half of the ball, they're finding connection. They're getting back to their best. Geelong have lost their last 5. I think secretly alarm bells are ringing, and it might be early to say that, but they've dropped out of the top 4. I think they're potentially, if they haven't already, looking at dropping into that wild card, and with some teams starting to really lift their game, could we see a season where Geelong misses the finals completely? It very rarely happens under Chris Scott, but this year, with the way that they're currently playing, could be the year that we see it happen again. Friday night shifted to the SCG with Sydney hosting the Bulldogs, and I foolishly thought the Bulldogs would win this game, and I tipped them very happily. I just thought that with how Sydney got opened up against Brisbane the week prior, the Bulldogs could capitalise and do the exact same thing, but I must have been living on a dream and hoping for a whim, because Sydney managed to pick up a 35-point win and just re-establish that their forward handballing game is still very, very much a scary thing to witness. They opened up the Bulldogs on many opportunity by handball alone. This was not just a win, this was a convincing win. This was a win that they very much needed, and this is a win that they helped establish, I think, to the competition once more, that they are still a serious contender. At quarter time, they led 5-3-33 to 3 behinds. Halftime, 8-5-53 led 3-8-26. Three-quarter time, 10-10-70 led 6-10-46. Final score line, 13-12-90, defeated 7-13-55. Two teams very inaccurate. This could have been a different game if the Bulldogs were accurate. This could have been a much bigger margin if Sydney were accurate. You can put your eggs in either basket. This is interesting because the Bulldogs just failed to get out of first gear and move into second and then third. They pretty much stalled from a parked fucking motion. They never got out of the gates. They had 16 more first attempts at stoppage, so they got their hands on the ball 16 more times than Sydney did. However, they only managed to lead that clearance tally by 3, which shows that just the pressure around the contest was too hard for them to handle. They were outscored by 9 points from stoppage in this game as well, and their connection inside 50, they had 20 less inside 50s for the game, and they turned the ball over in the forward half 16% more than what Sydney did. They were very haphazard moving the ball forward, and Sydney's defensive half are going to eat up some haphazard balls every day of the week. Blakey, McCartan, Rampy, these are the types of players that swallow intercept possessions, and they were feeding them all night. Sydney owned the field position all game. 60% of this game was spent in Sydney's forward half. That just goes to show how big of a shift Sydney moved into from last week to this particular week. They got absolutely towed up around the contest by Brisbane. They reset, they bounced back, and then they dominate a game like they did here. It was a huge turnaround. This to me is the sign of not just a quality team, but a quality coach. Just knowing how to bring things back around and just get things back on track so quickly. If you're a Sydney fan, you should be very happy with this outcome. The only injury out of this game was Buderick for the Bulldogs, ended with an ankle injury. I'm not sure about the severity, but breaking down the team stats, let's talk about the domination. There was 79 more disposals to Sydney on the night, 400 to 321. Of those, 225 to 185 kicks. They had 40 more kicks, and they managed almost, pretty much close enough to 40 more handballs. And again, 61 to 41 inside 50s. Disposal efficiency around the ground, Sydney ran at 80% versus 72. Sydney actually went at a lower inside 50 efficiency than the Bulldogs, given the fact that they had 20 more that didn't register from all of those scores, 49 to 53 respectively. But let's talk about this hit-out game. Brodie Grundy went next level, and I'm actually surprised that the clearance is so evenly split here, given that I mentioned the fact that there was only a, you know, in that clearance game, there was only a short little split. Like, Sydney lost the clearance by 3, but won the hit-outs by 41. 70 to 29 hit-outs. Huge. The stoppage clearance is where Bulldogs got the best of Sydney, 36 to 28. But it was all for naught. I mean, contested possession, Sydney had 10 more, but they had almost 60, well, they had 63 more uncontested possessions around the ground. They had 25 more marks around the ground, 97 to 72. Their tackling around the ground, they had more of the ball. They laid more tackles. Inside 50, they laid 20 tackles to 4. The pressure was just through the roof for Sydney. They'd really turned it up. This was huge. And I think, even though I did not give a vote to this man this week, I want to highlight him because he did miss my team of the week as well. But I very much want to talk about James Jordan. Now, he only had 13 disposals of his own. He laid 7 tackles. But this man kept Marcus Bontempelli to 19 disposals for the game. He might have had 9 clearances, but he did very little else in this game. And I think that's what helped Sydney, especially around that centre clearance. Being able to hamper Bontempelli, their best player. James Jordan, I take my hat off to you. He has some huge scalps every year, and this is probably the biggest one he has taken this season, especially given the fact that it helped propel Sydney to a huge win. When we talk about the 3-2-1, I think the only other man stiff for a vote here was Bailey Dale. Had a huge game for the Bulldogs with 32 disposals, 8 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, and he snagged a goal with just shy of 900 metres gained. But I don't think we can argue with the 3 that I've given votes to here. Maybe, configuratively speaking, we can shift players around, but I'm giving 1 vote to Brodie Grundy. 17 disposals, 9 contested, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 60 hit-outs, 6 clearances, 177 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. As much as Peter Laddams gives them a secondary opportunity to look at a ruckman here and some relief for Grundy, the fact that Grundy's come out solo and knocked out 60 hit-outs is absolutely huge. That is ridiculous numbers, given the fact that Tim English did play this game. And more often than not, when Tim English does not play, the Bulldogs suffer. But Tim English only had 10 disposals and 8 hit-outs himself in this game. Rory Lobb had 21. I just don't understand. It was just an absolutely ripping game. Grundy needed to get back into a little bit of form, and he definitely did that. 2 votes goes to Isaac Heaney, 27 disposals, 13 contested, 2 marks, 6 tackles, 8 clearances, 358 metres gained, 1 goal, 7 score involvements, and the 3 vote goes to Charlie Curnow, who's well and truly in the Coleman hunt after a very slow start to the year. 14 disposals, 9 were contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 347 metres gained, 6 goals, 10 score involvements. What did we learn about both these teams this week? Sydney have the capability of bouncing back and still producing some of the best football, and are still very much one to watch within that premiership window. I definitely still feel, just watching how teams have performed this year, Fremantle and Sydney are probably the 2 likely teams to face off in the grand final this year. Outside of that, maybe Brisbane. And you could probably argue a case for that. But for the Bulldogs, they're finding themselves in a position where they might drop into wildcard territory. And if they finish there, given the fact that we have seen them opened up like this, and there's now, you know, keys to the castle given in retrospects of knowing that if you shut key personnel down, they're going to struggle, it's not looking good for the doggies. West Coast hosting Adelaide in a game where I need to give credit where it's due. This was a game where many expected Adelaide to absolutely smack West Coast. I personally did say that I saw a realm of possibility here where West Coast could prove an upset, because playing at Optus is something they have done pretty well this year. But Adelaide walk away with a 25-point win. And while that is still, 4 goals, still pretty comfortable, and they'll take the 4 points, when you look at the statistical breakdown of this game, West Coast were up to their neck in it. They were incredibly competitive in this game. And for a young rebuilding team, irregardless of the fact that they have lost this, I think you hang your hat on the fact that you were able to match it and contest with a team that is finals bound, a team that on their run right now could very well finish in the top 4, and I'm actually banking on Adelaide to finish there given their run home. I didn't realise how cruisy a run home that they've got heading into the back half of the year. But again, I think this is a game where scoreboard flatters teams a little bit, especially when you have a look at it in isolation. I thought West Coast were great. This game ballooned out to something that could have been a hell of a lot worse, but West Coast just kept bringing it back. And I don't know whether that is attributed to Adelaide taking their foot off the gas a little bit, maybe letting West Coast creep back in. Riley Thilthorpe was a late out in this game, so obviously having him in the forward line would have helped tear things up a little bit more in the way of Adelaide, and they probably win this game by 6 or 7 goals comparatively to 4 goals if Riley Thilthorpe does play, let's be real. But having a look at the match timeline, again, just gives you a scope of how damaging this game could have been. And then when we talk about the team statistics, how involved West Coast actually were in this game. At quarter time, Adelaide led 6-2-38 to 1-3-9. At halftime, they led 9-5-59 to 4-5-29. At 3-quarter time, they led 13-8-86 to 8-8-56. And the final score line, 15-9-99, defeated 11-8-74. It was, as I said, I think the score line is a little bit flattering, because Adelaide only had 38 more disposals in this game, 369 against 331. They had more kicks, and that's where the differentiation comes from here, 233 to 198, 133 handballs to 136. Inside 50s, they only had 12 more inside, 44 to 56. So this game, in that retrospect, with the 12 more inside 50s, they could have been a hell of a lot more damaging, as I said. But West Coast just matched it around the ground. This was a highly adjudicated game. 28 to 25 free kicks, 53 for a game is rather wild, and yet is not the biggest margin you're going to see for free kicks in this video. There is a game that had almost 20 more free kicks for the game, over 70 free kicks paid. I'm not kidding. We will get there eventually. Looking at the stoppage game, Adelaide dominated the hit out 49 to 27 on the back of Lachlan McAndrew. But the clearance game, Adelaide only won by 2, 39 to 37. At the centre clearance, they won it 18 to 8. But at the stoppage, West Coast defeated them 29 to 21. And West Coast have been great at stoppage clearance this year. They can hang their hats on that proudly. Uncontested possession, unfortunately, is where they got chopped up the most. 183 to 217, the way of Adelaide. They turned the ball over 1 disposal less. They coughed up 19 more marks around the ground, unfortunately. And it was those marks that were able to set up what eventually won Adelaide the game. It was all those uncontested possessions and just slowing things down, shipping the ball around, and just getting things on their terms. Just set them up exponentially. 71 to 73 tackles, 12 to 16 inside 50 tackles. So the pressure was there from West Coast as well. As much as Adelaide won this game, I'm still vastly impressed with what West Coast brought to the table. When you have a look at like the top performing players, there are, going off of the ratings here, a decent handful of West Coast players that are being spoken about, as well as Adelaide players. And I love seeing that it's youngsters from these teams that are getting brought up. I mean, Hugo Hall-Kahan, who come in through the mid-season draft for Adelaide, has not missed a beat since being drafted. They've got an absolute gem with this kid. Tom McCarthy was great. Jake Saligo, Josh Worrell, Oliver Franku on debut was one of the highest rated players on the field. James Peatling Lachlan McAndrew. Liam Duggan had a great game. Tyler Young was great in defence. Jack Williams played a great game. Marcus Herbert was serviceable again. Just great to see all these names that you don't usually talk about in like consistent conversations all getting involved. But for the 3-2-1, I did land on 3 players from Adelaide. Stiff to miss was Lachlan McAndrew, who I did originally have in the 1 vote slot here. He finished the game as the 4th highest rated player on the field. 12 disposals, 7 tackles, 38 hitouts, 5 clearances. He was good. But Darcy Fogarty had a great outing in this game. 12 disposals, 7 contested, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 295 metres gained, 4 goals, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements. They win by 25. 24 of those points come off of Darcy Fogarty's boot. So to give him the 1 vote here in a game where his scoring alone sets that break, I think it's justifiable. 2 votes I gave to Rory Laird. I do miss him as an inside midfielder, but his defensive work off of half-back, very underrated for Adelaide, I feel, especially when we talk about Mark Keane, Josh Worrell, Mitchell Hinge, these players usually for that back 6. I feel Rory Laird kind of gets lost in the conversation a fair bit. 25 disposals, 6 were contested, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 156 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. And best on ground was Jordan Dawson, who I feel is in a conversation for the Brownlow within a probably 3 to 4 player mix for dark horse territory. He's had the last couple of months have been sensational for him, and I don't know whether a slow start to the start of the year hampers his ability to win one, but boy has he gone to another level. And if Adelaide are any chance of making top 4 and pushing for a premiership, this man here is going to carry them on his back and make sure they get there. 27 disposals, 10 were contested, 7 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 764 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 6 score involvements. What did we learn from both of these teams? With Adelaide, they are on the rise, they have a great run home, and I do not see a world of possibility where they do not finish outside of that top 4. I think they are going to lock in a double chance this year, and they're going to need it, because we saw last year minor premiers bounced out in back-to-back weeks. Maybe they've learnt from that, and maybe we see them go a little bit deeper into September. For West Coast, they lost the game, but statistically around the ground, they were well in the contest for all 4 quarters. So I wouldn't be as upset with this loss here. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and when you support a rebuilding club like I do, you always look for some light to cling onto in the darkest times, and there was a lot of light to look at to come out of this game. We then go down to the University of Tasmania Stadium, Hawthorn taking on Melbourne. Now, Hawthorn have been, very impressive over the course of the year, especially since getting on top of the stoppage game with players that, quite frankly, when matched up against some of the opposition they've taken on, don't have that same kind of caliber. You see, like your Collingwoods with Nick Dacos, you see your Bulldogs with your Marcus Bontempellis and your Ed Richards, the Gold Coast only the other week with Miller and Rowell and Anderson and Petrarca. You've got Will Day, who's come back from injury. You've got Jai Newcomb, 2 great players, but outside of that, you're expecting young kids to step up to the occasion, but they have been playing some great stoppage football and some fun football. Unfortunately, earlier this year, Melbourne came and upset their party in a big way and absolutely rocked them from the first round. And I thought they were going to get a little bit of comeuppance this time. I thought they were going to get some retribution. But Melbourne fucking mollywopped them again. And we almost saw the complete dismantling of Hawthorn and the complete uprise of Hawthorn in the exact same game. This game was wild. To think that a 35-point win to the Demons is what the outcome was, when at one point this was over 90 points the way of Melbourne. You heard me correctly. This was pushing to be a 100-plus point win, and they brought it back to 35 points. I don't know whether Melbourne got complacent. I don't know whether Hawthorn decided they were going to fucking start playing some football. But let me talk you through this match timeline. Holy shit. Hawthorn only managed 1-3 in the first half. At quarter time, 7-5-47 led 1-2. At half time, 13-8-86 led 1-3-9. They only managed one singular behind in that second quarter. Let me talk about the run that they got on here. Melbourne finished the third quarter 17-11, 113 to 5-5-35. Melbourne then only kicked 19-11. So they only kicked 2 goals in the final quarter. Hawthorn came home to kick 9 goals, 1. And I think they went on a stretch where heading into the final, into that final break, the third quarter break, collectively they had kicked the last something like 13 goals of the game. Absolutely unreal. As I said, we almost saw a slaughter, and then we almost saw the biggest comeback in modern history. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Hawthorn outscored Melbourne by 31 points in intercept game, 11 points from clearance. So they got on top again from that stoppage work, from their intercept work. So you can still applaud them for doing things that they did right. But to think again, for all that dominance, had there probably been maybe an extra 5 minutes on the clock, this could have been a turnaround that Melbourne would want to kind of fucking put in the back of their minds. Max Gawn got interviewed at the end of this game asking about the turnaround, and he was lost for words. He didn't know what to say. I think they happily take 4 points here. 35 points is still a very reputable win, but given the fact that this was almost 100 points the way of Melbourne, man, what could have been. And again, in a season where percentage is going to play so much factor into the outcome, I simply can't get my head around it, especially when you have a look at the team statistics for this game. It doesn't tell the tale of a team that was almost 100 points clear. Melbourne won the disposal count by 4. 349 to 345. They had 207 kicks to 216 handballs. 207 kicks, 216 kicks. 142 handballs to 129 handballs. They had 2 less inside 50s. 57 to 59. They both ran at 71% around the ground. Melbourne ran at 61% efficiency inside 50, up from 49% of their average for the year. Hawthorn ran at 45, which is down from their 52% average for the year. The stoppage game, tale of two tapes. Hawthorn won the hitouts 42 to 36. Melbourne dominated clearance 46 to 31. This is the first time in a long time Hawthorn have been comprehensively beaten in the stoppage game. 31 to 17 the way of Melbourne, which is something Sam Mitchell's not going to be happy about. Especially how proud he's been of that midfield core over the last few weeks. Contested possessions, Melbourne won by 17. Uncontested, Hawthorn won by 11. Hawthorn did turn the ball over 8 more times, 71 to 63. Around the ground, Hawthorn took 111 marks to 89, which is down, up on Hawthorn's average, but down on Melbourne's. Defensively, Melbourne laid 20 more tackles around the ground, including 9 more inside 50. So it was just that pressure work that set that early tone, getting all those goals. They're probably lucky they got that big of a break in the first half, because it was a tale of two halves. Melbourne dominated in that first. Hawthorn absolutely cleared them in the second. It was very impressive. And there's some players I'll quickly highlight that unfortunately did not get mentioned in votes this week. Mabior Chol kicked 5 goals. But I felt it was a little bit too late, because those 5 goals came later in the game, and while they attributed to coming back into it, I think there were players that were more influential on the game. I mean, Bailey Fritsch kicked 5 as well for Melbourne, but that was early on in the piece and then went quiet. So Noah Miraz on debut, 16 disposals, 12 marks, 2 tackles. He had a great first game out. I think they've got a great looking kid with him. Josh Ward had 25, 5 clearances, 4 tackles, really starting to grow into his own this year as well. However, here's the 3 I landed on for this particular game. The 1 vote I gave to Keziah Pickett, 25 disposals, 9 contested, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 611 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. I gave the 2 vote to Jacob Van Ruin, 24 disposals, 14 were contested, 8 marks, 2 tackles, 5 hit-outs, 4 clearances, 480 metres gained, 5 goals, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements. And I thought best on was Max Gawn. I just thought he really stemmed the flow when it needed to be stemmed. He was a big reason to their large, push in that first half. And ranking-wise was one of the highest rated players on the field. So I couldn't look past him. 22 disposals, 14 were contested, 5 marks, 1 tackle, 31 hit-outs, 10 clearances, 198 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. I feel in a game where Hawthorn, like for example, Jai Newcomb had 6 clearances, right? And he's been a clearance machine for Hawthorn. To have Max Gawn as that tall lumbering ruckman have more clearances than a Jai Newcomb, I think just influence around that stoppage game was heavily skewed because of Max Gawn being in there. And to no surprise, he's really starting to come into his own without like Max Heath or any secondaries, just like Brodie Grundy. I think the common trend we are learning out of this is these premier ruckmen are getting hampered by secondary ruckmen coming in. And if Melbourne moving forward are to continue pushing this thing, I feel Max Gawn needs to be solo ruck. Maybe chopped out every now and again, but don't have a secondary ruckman actually selected and sending Max Gawn deep 50. I think he's wasted deep down there. As for Hawthorn, still play finals this year. They've still got a fixture that sees them eyeballing top 4. I don't know whether they make it. They probably finish top 6. But this is probably a reality check that they needed. I feel a lot of Hawthorn fans were getting ahead of themselves. I feel Hawthorn themselves might have been getting a little bit ahead of themselves. But this is a game that just humbles you, brings you back down to earth. And I can guarantee you Hawthorn bounces back in a big way in round 18. Ladies and gentlemen, the streak is over. Adam Kingsley is now moonlighting as Brock Lesnar because the next game was at Manuka Oval. GWS Fremantle. 15 games in a row Fremantle had won, dropping that first game to Geelong by 10 points and have been the benchmark of the competition for 2026. And it was only a matter of time until somebody came along and knocked them off. But of all teams, I did not expect it to be GWS. 21 points, the victors, the Giants were, in a game where they comprehensively defeated Fremantle in almost every asset. This was a game that I feel, if you're going to highlight anything, you can talk about the forward half of GWS. You can talk about the fact that Stringer kicked 7. You can talk about Green kicking 3. You can talk about the midfield getting big numbers. But I think we chalk this win up to the defensive efforts of the Giants' back 6, especially given that Whitfield was on a huge run in the first half. He finished on 20 disposals. He copped an errant elbow just before halftime, which saw him taken out of the game under HIA, concussion. And even with him down, the defensive pressure and defensive efforts of the Giants was absolutely insane. And obviously from that, they're able to get that orange tsunami rolling through half back right through to half forward. And if you take away the Giants' defensive efforts here, you take away the work of their back 6, Stringer doesn't kick 7. Toby Green doesn't have as influential a game. Oliver doesn't have as influential a game through the midfield. Defenders don't get lauded enough, touted enough, spoken about enough. And there are some defenders for the Giants that are severely underrated. I personally think, now I spoke earlier in this video about the fact that I've done my best 22 under 22 video, which will come soon. I've also done my All-Australian team after 18 rounds, 17 rounds rather. And I have Connor Iden in my All-Australian team this year. You can talk about all other defenders in the competition that you think are better than him, but his statistics speak for themselves. I think he's only lost something like 12 to 13% of his one-on-ones this year. He has been sensational. And again, a game where he led the charge from that defensive half. Up until half-time, it looked like it was going to continue to be that arm wrestle. But after that, the GWS just put the foot down and ran away with it. And again, locking down certain forwards for Fremantle that it just took away avenues to score. They were intercept marking, they were rebounding, and then adversely on the other side, some of the defenders for Fremantle were so incredibly quiet. I think Adam Pearce only took like Alex Pearce only took 2 marks for the game. Maybe. This was so close. The first half was incredibly close. It was an arm wrestle back and forth. But after half time, things just really opened up for GWS. And again, being able to shut down forwards and negate scoring opportunity is one thing. But having forwards also play negating roles to lock down defenders, like Alex Pearce in this game, he normally eats up intercept marks every day of the week. I think he took 2 marks for the whole game in this game. It was very strange, given the fact that we saw Fremantle knock off the Gold Coast by 51, I'm getting choked up, I apologise, 51 points last week. This was a huge turnaround. This was a game that, although Fremantle lost, I still feel this loss only serves them greatness. I feel this is a game where they needed to lose a game. They needed to be humbled. They needed to be grounded and reassured that they're not playing a flawless brand, that they've got things to work on. And because they got beaten in certain areas, they now know where they need to improve. Again, selection is something big for Fremantle, because I feel Fremantle are a completely different looking team when Sean Darcy's in versus Mason Cox. And personally, if I was at the helm of Fremantle, I would be selecting Mason Cox over Sean Darcy. Maybe it's a hot take, feel free to disagree. But the match timeline shows you that arm wrestle in the first half, and then just GWS galloping away in the end. At quarter time, GWS had a slim lead, 5-3-33, leading 5-1-31. At half time, 9-4-58 led 7-3-45. 3-quarter time saw 13-9-87 lead 10-5-65. And the final score line, 16-13, 109, defeated 13-10, 88. There were some injury in this game. Obviously, as I said, Lachie Whitfield out with concussion, so he will miss another week. And Hayden Young with a groin injury, but I'm not sure on the severity. Team stats, GWS, not huge in the way of some gaps, but still winning the stats that needed to be won. 375 disposals leading 336, 206 kicks to 178, 169 handballs to 158, 62 inside 50s to 47, 76% by foot and hand around the ground, which is up on their seasonal average. Fremantle ran at 75, which is equal with their average. Both teams running unders for efficiency inside 50. GWS ran at 48%, down from 50 of their seasonal average. Fremantle have a seasonal average of 54, ran at 46. Now, Dockers still dominated the hit out, 46-24, and namely that was because of Luke Jackson, but GWS dominated clearance, 42-28, 15-10 in the way of centre clearance, 27-18 the way of stoppage clearance, 140-128 contested possessions, 234-203 uncontested. 12 more marks around the ground. They laid less tackles, obviously had more of the ball, so obviously if you've got more of the ball, more often than not, you're going to lay less tackles. Both having over 50 tackles, close enough to 60, both having 15 and 14 apiece inside 50, so the inside 50 pressure from both teams was up and about. But again, as I said, in isolation, when you look at how Fremantle's forward line was able to be stemmed, like Sean Darcy only has 15 hitouts and has 8 disposals for the game. That's all he did. All he did. At least Mason Cox would have given you an avenue forward half of the ball, especially when Jai Amos only manages to have 4 possessions for 1 goal. You have Alex Pearce defensively, as I said, only took 2 marks for the game. Hayden Young only took 2 marks for the game, but again was hampered through injury. You have a look, Isaiah Dudley kicks 1 goal. Frederick doesn't score. Patrick Voss kicks 2 goals, 2. Murphy Reed only manages 1. Tracy kicks 3. So serviceable from him. But so many other avenues to score that you would normally see getting well and truly out of hand, just struggled to get their hands on it. And it was from the efforts of Iden, the efforts of Lockie Ash, the efforts of Harry Himmelberg. Joe Fonte was standing up tall. Whitfield, as I said, in that first half, had 4 marks, 20 disposals, 1 clearance. Just unfortunate to see him go down. Sam Taylor only had 12 disposals, but had 4 marks, and he played a really good role, I felt, defensively. Just a comprehensive win. This was a win that the Giants needed so much so to just reconfirm to themselves that they do have ability to make finals, and I still feel GWS are in the mix for that wildcard contention. We can't completely write them off, because on paper, they've got one of the best teams in the competition. It's just they've failed to find that continuity this year, and that's what could cost them ultimately. And as I said about Fremantle, just a loss they needed. This doesn't derail anything. There's still a win clear on top of the ladder. They're still, I think, 3.5 wins clear of 3rd. So they're still comfortably in a top 4 finish here. It's just how they respond to this loss. Do they just reconfigure and bounce back like Sydney did this past week? Or does this loss do a little bit more damage, and does doubt start to creep in? Remains to be seen. For the votes for this game, I did give 1 vote to Connor Iden. 26 disposals, 7 contested, 12 marks, 1 tackle, 364 metres gained, 5 score involvements, and the 2nd highest rated Giant on the field. The 2 votes goes to the highest rated, and that was Toby Green. 26 disposals, 13 were contested, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 680 metres gained, 3 goals, 1 goal assist, 12 score involvements. But best on ground, you can tell when this bastard's in a contract year, it is Jake Stringer. 14 disposals, 7 contested, 6 marks, 393 metres gained, 7 goals, 1 goal assist, 11 score involvements. This is a team that popped off that needed to pop off. No Jesse Hogan, Aaron Cadman didn't have much input, but when you've got Stringer and Green kicking 10 between them, you've got a defensive line that stood as tall as they did. We cannot write GWS completely off in 2026. For Fremantle, just a down week. I wouldn't be worried. Let's move on. Boy, oh boy, let's talk about some controversy. People's First Stadium, Gold Coast, Collingwood. I was convinced Collingwood would win this game. I tipped them. They won by 6 points. It was a great contest to watch. But some of the fallout from this game needs to be spoken about. I think what we're going to do is we'll talk about the timeline. I'll break the team statistics and everything down. I'll do my votes, and then we'll talk about it to finish off this particular round, or this game for the round, rather. Match timeline. Quarter time. Collingwood led 4-4-28 to 3-2-20. Half time. 8-9-57. Led 7-3-45. 3/4 time. 11-13-79 led 11-6-72, and the final score saw Collingwood 15-14-104 defeat the Gold Coast 15-8-98. This was Collingwood's first interstate win for the year. So let's put that down in the books. And People's First is a very good win. It was led by Nick Dacos, who again, I've had arguments about Nick Dacos this week. I thought Nick Dacos in this game was best on ground, and there are other people that think so as well. And if you are like me on TikTok, on social media, and you see other content creators giving their thoughts on votes and whatnot, everybody giving Nick Dacos 3 votes in this game is getting absolutely dragged. And I think definitively his work in this game speaks for itself. There was only 2 players that had more contested possessions than he did. He had the most score involvements. He had one of the biggest, disposal counts for the game. He was as influential as anybody out on that field. And I just think that people are starting to get sick of the rhetoric around him being spoken about all the time, that they're kind of failing to see that maybe that talk is genuinely because he is such a talented player. Like, maybe it's a little bit over the top sometimes, but he backs it up. He walks the walk and he talks the talk. Maybe someone should let Nick Watson know that he does that. Anyway, let's look at... I don't think there was any injury. Let's just quickly have a look through that. There were not, but we will get momentarily onto a conversation point that comes out of this. Team statistics, let's break it down. There were a lot more disposal the way of the Gold Coast here. 409 to 354. They had 30 more kicks and they had 21 more handballs. 53 to 56 inside 50s was a pretty even split. I thought both teams ran at over 70% by foot, but both teams running below average inside 50. Gold Coast only running at 43% and Collingwood only running at 46%. Gold Coast dominated the hit-out game. Darcy Cameron is in a bit of a slump, and I don't see where this is coming from, because coming into this year, I regarded him as a top 5 ruckman in the comp, but he's definitely dropping off with that form. 54 to 33 hit-outs, but Collingwood still managed to win the clearance game 43 to 40 very marginally, winning the centre clearance by 2 and the stoppage clearance by 1. It was the uncontested game of Gold Coast where they got the jump on Collingwood, 262 to 217, but they did turn the ball over 8 more times, which Collingwood absolutely pounced on. These mark counts are insane. Like, Collingwood are averaging 102 marks for the year. We know they love to do that kick backwards, kick sideways style and slow things down, but they only managed 73 marks for this game. Gold Coast averaged 92 marks. They took 120 in this game, and there was plenty taken through their back half, a lot of which were some intercept possessions, which we will break down momentarily, because 2 defenders for Gold Coast are in the votes for me, and they both racked up some big marking counts. Around the ground, Collingwood laid 75 tackles to 43. 16 of those were inside 50, doubling Gold Coast output of 8. So the pressure was there, and the pressure mounted, and in the end, Gold Coast weren't able to amount to that pressure. Speaking of the Gold Coast intercept game, defensively speaking, like Bodie Hewland has 8 intercept possessions, Sam Collins has 8, Noble has 7, and then you had all the uncontested ball through that back 6 that was really trying to push and set things up for the Gold Coast. But Collingwood, and what the undoing for the Gold Coast was, and we've seen it against Geelong, just, forward 50 turnover killed them. Collingwood put them to the sword. It was a huge game. It was a huge game for both teams. They both threw everything at it. Retrospectively, looking at the misses on goal from Collingwood, you could argue that this should have been a margin that could have been a bigger blowout, but yeah, boy oh boy. I'm actually going to go on the fly here and change one of my I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to change one of my votes, and I've done this before on the fly. I've just had a look at some stats here, and I actually feel like I undercredited somebody for the game that they had. So let's turn it up. Let's change it. I'm giving one vote to Zeke Hewland, who ended up getting this week's NAB Rising Star nomination. He had 32 disposals. 1 was contested. 16 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 553 metres gained, 1 goal and 2 score involvements. I am giving the 2 vote now, which originally was John Noble. I'm shifting tact. I'm giving it to Touk Miller. 28 disposals. How many of those are contested? You're going to have to allow me to quickly jump into the secondary form here and tell you that information. Of those, his contested work was 9. He had 4 score involvements to go along with those, and the rest of his stats read as follows. He had 3 marks, 10 tackles, 2 clearances, 258 metres gained, if you don't mind. A huge defensive game for him inside that midfield, and I love how he goes about it. 3 votes I gave to Nick Dacos, though. 31 disposals, 11 were contested, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 8 clearances, 478 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements. Now, as I said, led the game for clearances. He was in the top 10 for tackles. For score involvements, he led. For contested possessions, there were only 2 that had more than he did. For just disposals in general, there were only 2 more than he did, and it was only 33 and 32, so only 2 and 1 more, and those were by defenders that were chopping it around. I just think the rhetoric around Nick Dacos in a negative light kind of needs to stop. Like, I can understand people calling him a seagull because he gets many uncontested possessions, but I mean, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, for example, jumping the gun here and having a look further down my screen, he had 46 disposals in his game, and only 10 of those were contested. And of those, he had 10 score involvements. So 36 disposals were nothing really done, with. So if you're talking Seagull, you know what I mean? Like, at least with Dacos here, 12 score involvements from 31 disposals, almost half of what Nick Dacos' touch ended up in a score. Do the math, people. Collingwood still very much in the window for a wild card appearance. Gold Coast losing another game, though. They're sliding down. I think they have now dropped into that wild card configuration after a hot start to the year. Could we see them miss entirely? Before we move on, I need to talk about something here. In this game, we saw Ben Long drop a dog shot on Brayden Maynard. Like, he wasn't expected, off the ball, shot to the ribs, which ended up escalating into an all-in brawl. Everyone just getting on top of each other, throwing each other around. And then it escalated later in the term with another big gathering in which Brayden Maynard running into the pack makes contact with an umpire, as well as Tuke Miller making contact with an umpire as well. Now, it looks like in this instance, the umpire is pushed out of the way. Whether Maynard or Miller was the one to push remains to be seen. But everyone was saying that Maynard was going to cop weeks for this. And everyone was kind of glazing over the fact that Miller should get weeks too, then, if that's the case. In the end, Maynard and Miller both get a $5,000 fine, and Ben Long gets a 2-week suspension for his hit on Maynard. This has sent the AFL media into raptures. David King has called the AFL week as piss. Kane Corns has weighed in. Lee Montagna has weighed in. Everybody suggesting that the AFL need to take a harsher stance. I think it was Tom Morris reported that he had spoken to umpires who had expressed their disdain towards the AFL for not protecting them and not having the balls to suspend Maynard or Miller. It's an interesting prospect, because I'm of the belief that all of these accidental contacts need to be reconfigured a bit. If the players need to have spatial awareness and be out of the umpire's way, then I feel the umpire needs to have enough spatial awareness to know what's going on around them as well. Because I feel the umpires are putting themselves in positions where, unfortunately, they are going to get accidentally knocked into. I think that's different with the Maynard case. I think Maynard, even though his sights are on running into the pack, the umpire's there, he still makes contact with the umpire. Now, I'm not suggesting 6 weeks like Toby Green when he shoulder blocked him, but a week or two should have sufficed given some of the sanctions we've seen for umpire contact in the past. But I just wanted to touch on that, because transitioning into the next game, we need to just focus more on talking about umpiring, because my heart was broken on Saturday night. Richmond Carlton MCG. Second game this year where Tom Lynch could have won it off his own boot but didn't. Fucking bastard. Carlton win by 2. Carlton have beaten Richmond collectively by 8 points this year. 6 points, I think, even, maybe. 4 and then 2. Yeah, wild. This is a game that Richmond could have and should have won, and I feel we should have. There was some very controversial decisions that went down in this game for Carlton, but then equally, holding the ball seems to be adjudicated 2 different ways in the same game. So we'll talk about it when the time comes. Let's break down the match timeline. At quarter time, Richmond led 5-3-33 to 2-3-15. At halftime, Carlton led 7-7-49 to 6-5-41. At 3-quarter time, Carlton led 9-10-64 to 7-8-50. And in the final quarter, 10-14-74 defeated 10-12-72. Weren't without their efforts. I mean, Carlton go on to kick 1 goal for in the final term. Richmond kicked 3 goals for. Could have very well been a different ball game. Tom Lynch has 3 shots on goal, kicks 1 behind and misses 2 completely. Richmond in this game, I'm actually quite surprised. We were sensational from stoppage, and I think this year we've really turned that around. Historically, over the last couple of years, we've been beaten up in the midfield, but in this particular game, we won centre clearance 13-8, and we scored 3 goals too from that centre break, which is our 3rd highest total from source since 2024. Light at the end of the tunnel. We got to cling on to it. On turnover, Carlton outscored Richmond 51-24. and that is their equal largest differential for the season, and that is what chopped us up. There was a 2-minute period that I would rather forget. Nick Vlosten kicking the ball in, turning it straight over, and they score a goal. I'd rather take that back because we win the game without that. Yeah, it was rough. There was still plenty of skill error out of this game, plenty of unforced error, and it's not good football. And ultimately, that's what cost Richmond the game. I can talk about umpiring decisions all I want, but fundamentals breaking down and easy things like transitioning ball, hitting targets, it wasn't our night. Wasn't our night at all. Jack Ross ended the game concussed, and he was only just come back from concussion, and he was out for a few weeks with that. So there's talk going around that he could miss 5 to 6. If he's going to miss 5 to 6 and we're heading into round 18 and there's 24 rounds, I would probably just suggest sit him out for the rest of the year and make sure he's right. I wouldn't bring him back prematurely. Thankfully, Sam Banks went off with injury but ended up coming back onto the field and finished off the game. We can be happy about that. Looking around the ground, Carlton did dominate the disposal, 372 to 318. Both teams had 49 inside 50, so we both had equal looks. Richmond was actually cleaner with ball in hand, 72% against 69. But efficiency inside 50, 44 for Richmond, 57 for Carlton. As I said, we did have the better of the clearance game. They did win the hitouts 39 to 38, but we won the clearance 43 to 13. Centre clearance, we won 13 to 8. Stoppage clearance, we won 30 to 23, which I thought was huge. It was their uncontested game that killed us in the end. 225 uncontested to 183. Turnovers, we had 69. Don't mind. We averaged 85 marks a game. Only managed 68 for this one. Carlton managed 101. And yeah, we laid 61 tackles. It was great to see a good pressure game from us. 13 inside 50. We did all the right things. We did all the right things, and we just couldn't capitalise at the end of the day. As I said, Tom Lynch was a bit rough, but I've been coming back from a fractured larynx, so I'm not expecting 100% out of him. But if he gets selected, I suppose you are expecting a lot out of him. But there are a lot of players that stood tall, like Toby Nankervis, second highest rated player on the field. Noah Bolter. We look exponentially better out of the ruck with Noah Bolter in there instead of Toby Nankervis. And I think these new ruck rules go against Toby because he's an old school beat around Basham ruckman. And it doesn't suit him anymore. It's why it's kind of gone past Cherry a little bit. It's gone past Briggs. They're old school kind of ruckman. Seth Campbell was great with 2 goals. Makaiti Lafau kicked 2. McAuliffe was great inside the middle. Taj Houghton had his best game for us. He's going to be a stud. He's going to be a genuine star. Can't wait to see these kids grow into impressive players. Ryan Mansell kicked 2 and a goal of the year contender, if you don't mind. Trezise was solid. Tom Brown was solid. Cumming was a little bit quiet comparatively to previous games, but was solid. Kai Anand in our back 6. Love how he goes about it. Ben Miller, lowest rated player on the field, which is very unlike him given how highly touted he is as a defender. Had 7 possessions, didn't take a mark. Did not take a mark all game. That is very surprising. But to win the clearance game like we did when, for example, Patrick Cripps still had 6, but I didn't feel his influence all too much. Adam Chera had 2 clearances. Jaga Smith had 4. Hewitt had 4. Sam Walsh only had 4, so we were able to limit it. And then on the flip side of things, like Seth Campbell had 4 clearances on his own. Bolter had 3. Nankervis had 9. Taranto had 8. Kane McAuliffe had 6. Taj Houghton had 4. We have been hit from pillar to post with injury this year, but what has really opened up opportunity for us is opportunity for players to step up. And with no Prestia, no Hopper, we've been able to see Cumming in the midfield more, Houghton in the midfield more, and these young players getting more access, like McAuliffe, and just really rising to the occasion just gives me enough hope and faith that our rebuild is heading in the right direction. Whether or not we need a new coach is to remain to be seen. And little insider scoop here, Richmond apparently very keen on signing Ken Hinkley, if not in a coaching role, as a potential head of football role. And if we can sign Ken Hinkley at the end of the year which will be solely dependent on whether or not we can remain competitive for the last, handful of games, the next 2 months. If we land Hinkley, take your money to the bank. Zach Butters comes to Richmond in 2027. Heard it here first. Giving out votes for this game was a bit rough because I could have gone either way. I am giving 1 vote to Tim Taranto. 25 disposals, 10 were contested, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 8 clearances, 404 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. We needed someone to stand tall. Tiger Tim got the job done. 2 vote goes to Noah Bolter. As I said, him in the ruck just gives us such better look. I think he had something like 9 hitouts, or he had 6 hitouts in the end. From those 6, 3 of those led to direct score. So he was getting the ball out of congestion. He was winning his own game, getting his own clearance. He kicked a couple of goals himself. He has become our unicorn. You can play him defense, forward, in the ruck. Wherever we need him, he plays it, and he's been more than serviceable in the role he's played over recent months. 15 disposals, 10 were contested, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 6 hitouts, 3 clearances, 348 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, 8 score involvements. But I thought best on, and the match winner for Carlton, was George Hewitt. 26 disposals, 10 were contested, 4 marks, 9 tackles, 4 clearances, 235 metres gained, 2 goals, 5 score involvements. Carlton still yet to lose a game with Josh Fraser at the helm. Should have lost this one, but didn't. Why they should have? I think the holding the ball adjudication is still, and it's not just with Richmond, there's other games as well. One team will get holding the ball all night, the other team will get it adjudicated differently. There was instances where Richmond were getting tackled with no prior opportunity, and the umpire straight away is calling holding the ball, resulting in shots on goal for Carlton. In the dying seconds of this game, Ben Ainsworth picks up the ball, V-lines through traffic, plenty of time to get rid of it, gets caught holding the ball, and the umpire can't call ball up any fucking faster if he tried. Should have had a shot on goal. Seth Campbell could have iced it. It would have either been Carlton by 1 or Richmond by 4. That's the stark reality. However, there are some instances where Carlton could have been up by a much bigger margin. There was an instance where it does look like, from certain angles, that Harry Mackay had his arms chopped in a marking contest. Maybe even front-on contact, if you want to look at it that way. Umpire doesn't pay it. It's play on. Brody Kempton picks up the ball, stops walking around with it because he's trying to suggest it's a free kick. So he's just standing there for a good amount of time, gets tackled, and the umpire says, oh yeah, I'll have it, I'll ball it up. Now, I feel what the AFL needs to do here is, if it's a common sense thing and a player, like, the ball spills into their hands from a non-free kick and then it's straight away ball up, common sense, okay, fair enough. But if there's enough time for the umpire to continuously still say there, hasn't made a call, you're just staring at the umpire holding the fucking ball and you're tackled and it's holding the ball, it's holding the fucking ball. Adjudicate it that way. Because then what happens is George Hewitt snaps a fucking goal from stoppage on the next play and puts Carlton up by more. So Harry Mackay could have been having a shot on goal to put them up. Richmond should have got a free kick for holding the ball. You know what I mean? Kind of 2 scenarios there where things go south. Then later in the game, very late, Nick Haynes has the ball. Nick Haynes? Yeah, it's Nick Haynes. Has the ball in defensive 50 for Carlton. Takes the ball over the line. Now, from the angle that was shown by the camera, the ball was over. I don't know whether other angles will show otherwise. Some are suggesting it wasn't over the line, whatever the case may be. Nick has actually himself said that he probably just should have walked completely over the line just to eliminate any doubt. But essentially what has happened is the goal umpire hasn't fully registered it's gone over the line. Umpire in play hasn't seen it go over. All they've seen is Nick Haynes kind of move the ball over, bring it back into play, and then under no pressure, steps back over the line with it, and the umpire pays deliberate, and Makaiti Lafell kicks a goal. Then in the next sequence, we get a free kick from centre clearance, we get the ball forward from a free kick, and then we bring it back to that 2-point gap. So we kick 2 in a minute. Again, Ball was over the line. Ark has the ability to override and say the ball's gone over, do it. But the fact that they've already paid the free kick, the goal's been kicked, they can't reverse that goal. So due diligence didn't come into play there. And I can argue yet, okay, I'll give you that one. But there was some shocking decisions all game. Like holding the ball in the last minute was just thrown out the door. And I just feel it's very rough to see one team adjudicated one way and another the other. Like, I see Richmond, for some reason, we're like in a plus 19 differential for free kicks this year. And I think to myself, it's funny that we're a plus 19 and we're the beneficiary of free kicks when we don't seem to be getting holding the ball paid all too much. That's just me probably just arguing on a whim. But yeah, I just feel this game had moments that umpires would rather take back. And I think in the off season this year, if the AFL are to be taken any more seriously than what they are now, at least, they need to reassess their umpiring protocols and their rules and making sure they get things right. And the ARC, for fuck's sake, they've got to improve it. Otherwise, we're going to go backwards. Richmond, what do we take away from this game? We see a competitive side again. It's just the continuity of keeping this, this pressure going. The handball game is working well for us, and I don't understand why we get rid of it. I want to see this Richmond for the rest of the year. We're trying to land some big fish. Need to play well in order to do so. Carlton, though, they're on a rip. They're currently in the wildcard contention now. After starting the year off 1-7, 1-8. To think that they could be playing finals. Fuck, I hope they don't win one because we won't be able to shut them the fuck up. Last week, I said sometimes, unfortunately, when it comes to doing content like this and speaking about every game over the course of a weekend, you're going to come across a game or two sometimes where you don't spend much time talking about it because nothing really exciting came from it and it was pretty one-sided. And unfortunately, Essendon versus St Kilda falls exactly into that pocket. And it's got the AFL media spinning. The drop-off from Essendon this year has been huge. It hasn't been without injury. It hasn't been without form drops. But I made a bold call this year saying that I thought Richmond would win more games than Essendon. But I did not expect Essendon to be dead last. And very hard to see them winning another game for the rest of the year. So, boy oh boy. Didn't think they'd win the wooden spoon this year, but it's looking very likely. I mean, the match timeline, man, they only kicked 3 goals in the first half, and then they only kicked another 4 for the rest of the game. It was rough. Quarter time, St Kilda led 5-4-34 to 2-1-13. At halftime, St Kilda led 13-8-86 to 3-3-21. 3-quarter time, a very slow quarter for St Kilda. 14-10-94, led 4-5-29. Wild to think in that term. St Kilda only kicked 1 goal too. Essendon only managed 1 goal too. And then in the final term, St Kilda 17-15-117 defeated Essendon 7-8-50. This was as poorly executed a skill game from Essendon that I've seen in a very long time. There is footage going around where an Essendon defender off halfback kicks it straight to a St Kilda player who runs 50 metres and then slots it through for a goal. It was that easy. They were raffling goals off at this point in time. Looking at the team stats, St Kilda dominated disposal 447 to 332, 244 kicks leading 184, 203 handballs leading 148, 55 inside 50s for the Saints, over 37 for Essendon, 79% efficiency for St Kilda, matched with their 61% efficiency inside 50, which is well up from their 53% average. Essendon did win the hitouts, 49 to 28, surprisingly. However, stoppage and clearance was won by St Kilda. Uncontested possession is where they chopped them up, 210 to 317. 127 marks by St Kilda, up on 100 average. 82 marks by Essendon, down on their 95 average. 65 tackles. To think St Kilda here have had, what, 115 more disposals and still laid 19 more tackles for the game is outrageous. 16 of those were inside 50. This was ugly for Essendon. Very ugly, and you just take a raffle of all the highest rated players on this field. It's St Kilda, then Zach Merritt, and then a handful of St Kilda, and then Xavier Dersma, and then a handful of St Kilda again, and then Jacob Farrow. Ben Mackay, Mr. 800,000, doesn't take a mark at full back. Oh, he played forward because he kicked a goal. And they've been playing him forward recently, but I mean, doesn't take a mark, 5 disposals, 1 goal. Wasn't drafted as a forward, and I can understand Solomon was wanting to mix things up, but I wouldn't be playing him there. Kako doesn't kick a goal, only has 6 disposals. Setterfield only laid 1 tackle and had 10 disposals. Archer Day Wicks had 8 touches. Parrish had 15 touches and 2 tackles. Archie Perkins had 15 touches. Nick Cox only had 10. Ridley only had 11. McGrath only had 17. Sardell Hawley only had 13. Wild. To think Liam Ryan only had 7 touches but kicked 2 goals too and was more influential than any of those Essendon players that I just named. Crazy. 3-2-1 was quite compelling for me here. I gave 1 vote to Max Hall. 33 disposals, 7 were contested, 9 marks, 9 tackles, 5 clearances, 500 metres gained, 1 goal, 11 score involvements. 2 votes I gave to Bradley Hill. 42 disposals, 4 of which were contested, 14 marks, 655 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 10 score involvements. And Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira gets the 3 vote from me, 46 disposals, 10 contested, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 897 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements. Now, I was talking about Naz in a negative light before, but when you put up numbers like 46 disposals, right, 10 of those are contested, so 36 uncontested, only lays 2 tackles, only has 1 clearance, only kicks 1 goal, has 10 score involvements. So that means 36 of those disposals are not only uncontested, but you're doing nothing with them. And that's because of all that. I don't know how many kick-ins he had for this game, so I'd have to look at numbers like that. And I don't think statistically on the AFL website you can actually configure kick-ins as a number here. Let me just have a little look here to see whether kick-ins can be spoken about. I don't think they can. As much as I would love to see how many disposals from kick-in he had, because I know he loves a kick-in. He does love a kick-in. Yeah, you can't. That's unfortunate. But even inside 50s, for example, right? Let's have a look. Let's put inside 50s up as a marker, and then go inside 50s for the game. He has 6 from his 46, and then 10 of those. So he's getting the ball inside, but not much. Maybe it's the way he's being played. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh. But I feel on a personal level, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira is glazed more in the essence of output versus reality, quantity versus quality. He gets a lot of it, sometimes doesn't do much with it. But this game, it's still probably being harsh on him because, you know, all of that uncontested ball they had, and, you know, Bradley Hill has 42, only has 4, 33 for Max Hall, he only has 7 contested, so it was an uncontested style game, so maybe it's a little bit too harsh on Naz in that retrospect. But St Kilda absolutely dominated them and needed to in a season where they're fighting for wild card contention and percentage is going to play a factor. And for Essendon, we'll probably just put a strike through them, and Essendon fans are probably just praying for Nick Martin to come back for 2027 to start already. Final game of the round. I've been waiting to talk about this one because umpiring, holy shit, talk about an over-adjudicated game. Port Adelaide hosted North Melbourne at Adelaide Oval. 21 points. The victors were Port Adelaide. Match timeline will show that at quarter time they were tied 1-3 apiece. At halftime, Port Adelaide led 5-6-36 to 2-5-17. At three-quarter time, it was a tie again, 7-9 apiece. And then the final score, 10-13-73, defeated 7-10-52. North Melbourne only managing 1 behind in the final term. Port Adelaide went on to kick 3 goals for. This was North Melbourne's 15th consecutive loss at Adelaide Oval. 19-5 inside 50s, 17-9 from midfield intercept, and from that they scored 3 goals to Port Adelaide. North Melbourne did not score from stoppage intercept, midfield intercepting at all. Yeah, wild, rough. I don't think there were injuries. Let's quickly just skim over that to make sure there were not. Let's talk about team statistics, and then let's get involved with the umpiring here. So, Port Adelaide win the game, but North Melbourne dominate disposal, 380 to 295. Of those, Port Adelaide only had 79 handballs for the game. North Melbourne had 172. Port Adelaide had 216 kicks to 208. Inside 50s, Port Adelaide led 57 to 42. Both only just over 40% efficiency inside 50. Free kick count, 38 to 33. There were 71 free kicks paid in this game. To put that into retrospect, there is about, roughly, without stoppage and everything else, 70 to 80 minutes in a game of football. So you're telling me this game, almost every 1.5 to 2 minutes, had a free kick paid? That's fucking wild. It is the biggest free kick count since 2006. Fucking 18 years it took. And I mean, when you look at the averages for free kicks, Port Adelaide's only averaging 19 a game this year. They got 38 in this one. Almost 20 more than their average. 33 for North Melbourne, up on their 21. That's wild to me. I hate when games are over adjudicated and the whistles don't get put away. And then yet you have games like Richmond Carlton, for example, which could have used a little bit more whistle, but they were put away. I don't know. Stoppage game, hitouts, 35 to 23 the way of Port Adelaide, 35 to 29 clearances the way of Port Adelaide. Uncontested possession is where North Melbourne dominated, 239 to 157. They had a much more amount of the ball on the outside uncontested, and they just failed to do anything with it. Strikes a bit of a chord. They apparently ran at 75% efficiency with all of that uncontested ball, and yet could only get 42 inside 50s, so they lost the count by 15. What were they doing with all that uncontested ball? That's probably their undoing, realistically. Just going through the votes here, I feel I'm looking at this list, and there are some that are going to be stiff, and people aren't going to agree with me here. I think Luke Davies-Uniacke might be in the conversation for votes here. Probably should be, but he's not. Colby McKercher could get votes here. I gave Zach Butters 1 vote. I think his work in the midfield for Port Adelaide was influential enough, I feel, to get them over the line, to get that win. 26 disposals, 10 were contested, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 568 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. I gave the 2 vote to Jason Horne-Francis. 24 disposals, 13 were contested, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 9 clearances, 282 metres gained, 1 goal, and 5 score involvements. And I gave best on to Harry Sheezel. 40 disposals, 12 contested, 7 marks, 9 tackles, 6 clearances, 495 metres gained, 1 goal, 5 score involvements. See, this is where a 40-game disposal from Harry Sheezel, I can justify 3 votes here, because 9 tackles, 6 clearances. He's winning his own ball. He's laying tackles. But Naz has 46. He has 1 clearance, 2 tackles. You know what I mean? Like, there's no defensive work coming out of him. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I think maybe Naz should be kept out of that defensive 6 for St Kilda and should be just purely an inside mid. Hey, who knows? But what did we learn from here? Port Adelaide still, I don't think they're wildcarding this year. I think they're still a bottom 6 team. While North Melbourne is in wildcard contention, and they can't afford to let games like this slip. Losing games like this could mean they miss that finals run, which would be upsetting because they've played some exciting football from time to time. Their biggest problem, same with Port Adelaide, their battle with continuity is what is their ultimate undoing. With all the games spoken about, we can now turn attention to the AFL ladder and reveal where your team is situated after 17 rounds of football. In first place on 56 points, 1 win clear, we have Fremantle. In second place on 52 points, 2.5 games clear of the next best, we have Sydney. In third place on 42 points, half a game clear of the next best, we have Hawthorn. Brisbane have moved up into 4th place on 40 points. Adelaide have moved up to 5th place on 40 points. Melbourne have moved up to 6th place on 40 points. All that is separating Adelaide from the top 4 right now is 0.3%. This is why I'm saying percentage is going to play factor. Outside of that, if Hawthorn weren't half a game clear, they wouldn't be in the top 4 because there is a better percentage underneath them. In 7th place, dropping down out of the top 6, Geelong on 36 points, followed by the Western Bulldogs in 8th place, also on 36 points. In 9th place, moving up on 34 points, we have Collingwood. Moving up to 10th place into the wildcard round, we have Carlton on 32 points, with North Melbourne in 11th, dropping out of wildcard, also on 32 points, again separated by less than 5%. St Kilda have shifted up to 12th place on 28, GWS have shifted up to 13th on 28, and the Gold Coast have dropped to 14th with 28. This is a team, Gold Coast, that started with that undefeated streak themselves this year, and they've fallen from grace. They've gone from top 4 to bottom 5. Who'd have thought? Port Adelaide, despite the win, 24 points in 15th place. But in retrospect, that is only 2 wins currently out of wildcard. Can some things happen over the next couple of weeks? West Coast sitting 16th on 16 points. Richmond sitting 17th on 8 points. Essendon sit in 18th place on 4 points. With all the formalities out of the way, we can now turn attention to the more personable, the more creative, starting with my 2026 MVP Award leaderboard from 10th through to 1st. And it's not a traditional 10th to 1st. On Brownlow night, for example, if there's a leader and then there's a tie for 2nd, you'll see 2nd and 2nd, and then it'll be 4th and 5th. I've broken it down by positioning and votes. And if you're in 10th place on 14 votes and you're tied, you're all in 10th. Then you're all in 9th and you're all in 8th. Do you get it? It's understandable? Good. Okay. This is my leaderboard after 17 rounds. In 10th place on 14 votes, I have Will Ashcroft. In 9th place on 15 votes, I have Max Holmes. In 8th place on 16 votes, I have Jai Newcomb, Jason Horne-Francis, and Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira. In 7th place on 17 votes, I have Max Gawn. In 6th place on 19 votes, I have Marcus Bontempelli and Jordan Dawson. In 5th place on 20 votes, I have Luke Jackson. In 4th place on 22 votes, I have Zach Butters. In 3rd place on 24 votes, I have Isaac Heaney. In 2nd place on 25 votes, I have Bailey Smith. And tied for 1st place on 28 votes, I have Nick Dacos and Harry Sheasel. And there is all but one thing to do to officially recap this round, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 17. And I'm pretty convinced with how this one went down. I hope you guys agree. In defence, I have Darcy Wilmot and Connor Iden in the back pockets and Cal Wilkie at full back, with Bailey Dale and Zeke Hewland on the half-back flanks and Tom McCartan at centre half-back. Across the midfield, I have Bailey Smith and Isaac Heaney on the wings, with Jordan Dawson in the centre. In the ruck, I have Max Gawn. In ruck rover, I have this week's captain in Nick Dacos and Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira in rover. In the forward line, I have Kai Loman and this week's vice captain Toby Green on the half forward flanks, and Patrick Dangerfield at centre half forward, with Jake Stringer and Jacob Van Rooyen in the forward pockets and Charlie Curnow at full forward. On the interchange, I have Brodie Grundy, Keziah Pickett, Max Hall, Bradley Hill, and Harry Sheasel. This week's coach of the round is Adam Kingsley, and this week's assistant coach of the round is Chris Fagan. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. The round has officially been recapped. I do thank you for joining me once more. Plenty of content dropping this week. I finally got it done. A tipping video will follow this particular one heading into round 18. And then over the course of the weekend, I will reveal my best 22 under 22 team with a handful of rounds to go, and my All-Australian team with a handful of rounds to go. And then obviously after the home and away season has concluded, we can compare my teams with the teams that are revealed, and I can then get my definitive end of season teams out as well. We'll do all that when the time comes. Do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do me a favor and hit that like button down below. And if you want to get on board the community we are building here, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.